Welcome once again to Natasha's Stories. I'm Natasha. I'm going to be reading a selection of original stories, which I hope you will enjoy. I think this story might still be appropriate. I know that everyone in the neighborhood is awaiting my arrival with eagerness and anticipation. But this time, I'm definitely not in a hurry. I know I'm hardy, but this is definitely ridiculous. Who in his right mind wants to go out in this freezing cold? The other day I wanted to poke one of my leaves outside and received such a jolt to my system you can't imagine. There was no air whatsoever to breathe. It was dark, damp, suffocating. I didn't know what to think. All of a sudden, I heard this little girl's voice float by saying, "Daddy, there is so much snow. Maybe we can make a snowman when we go home." So that's what it's called. Then a little later, another voice. "Everything looks so white, it is really dazzling." So I thought to myself, here I am in a dark cellar, and outside all is white. Strange. Well, one thing for sure, I ain't going up there. I know it's my time, I feel it, and I've never been wrong, but I'm not that brave. What's that? My mother is saying that my brother Theo is braver than I because he's climbing the ladder and going up, and that I should follow his example because what would the family think since I'm the oldest, and on and on and on she went, until I said, okay. I pushed, groaned, shoved, lost my balance, got up, and finally peeked out, and there we were, Theo and I, breathing the cool, cold air, getting our bearings, when these voices floated by. "Spring cannot be far behind. Look at these beautiful crocuses." Clever solution. "You are going to sit here for as long as it takes," my mother says sternly, and she goes out of the dining room with her back ramrod straight. Her footsteps are rhythmic and measured. That's how she walks when she's angry. I'm left alone, sitting at the table with uneaten spinach on my plate. Outside the sun is shining, and my friends have already yelled, asking me to join them. My mother told them to be quiet, and I would come out later. I am desolate. After all, I'm only 6 years old. I often hear my parents arguing a lot about their rights and how others should respect them. Well, I have a right, and mine is that I hate spinach. It's bitter, tasteless, mushy, yucky, period, and I should not have to eat it. What am I going to do? If I eat this junk, I just know I'm going to throw up, and then I'll be in really big trouble, and I bet my mother will serve it to me every day. She did that once because I made a face when she served me carrots. They were at least edible and looked nice compared to this sticky, ugly, green mess. I wish I had a dog. I could give it to him. What if I cried and sobbed out loud? She won't care. I already tried it. Doesn't work. I wish I was an orphan without a mother to bully me. I don't like her. From the moment I get up in the morning, she has something to say to me. "Hurry up, slowpoke." And that is just the beginning. Then I have to answer all those questions when I get home from school. And if the teacher writes a note that I'm not perfect in spelling, addition, and writing, or even drawing, my mother yells and sends me to my room, and there's no TV, no playing outside for a week. And the punchline is, wait until I tell your father. He just tells me to do better and goes back to reading the paper. It's getting dark. I need to go to the bathroom, but I don't dare call out. I have to think of something. I look around, and I'm asking God to help me. And then He gives me the answer. Thank you, thank you. I look down at the carpet, and there are pictures of big flowers with green leaves. I go down on my hands and knees, and very carefully with my knife, put bits of spinach on the leaves all over the rug. My plate is empty, and I yell out, "I'm finished!" Love your neighbor. Every time I leave my apartment on Riverside Drive at 6 in the morning in order to jog, I see the same young woman huddled in a doorway a few blocks away. She's young, with badly trimmed black curly hair and an oval pale face. I cannot tell the color of her eyes because they are shut and she seems asleep. I keep thinking about her while I run. I wonder about her life. I feel guilty. I should do something to help her. After all, I have plenty and I'm well-to-do. I thought about giving her money, but she's not begging because there are no receptacles in front of her. It would be tacky if I left some bills on her skirt. I was brought up to have a social conscience and to share, so I give to many different charities. However, now I'm faced every day with reality. This young girl has no real shelter. She wears the same clothes, and I notice they're getting dirtier and more frayed as time goes by. I don't know what to do. I honestly wish that my conscience would not bother me. Sometimes I run looking the other way, but her image is imprinted on my brain. One day I tell myself, I'll walk up to her, tap her gently on the shoulder, and ask her softly, "Can I help you?" The reason which is keeping me from doing it is that besides giving her money, I really don't want to invest in time and effort. What if she spends what I give her on food or a new shirt, and she's still sitting here? Do I want to offer her a place to stay in my home? Of course not. I cannot imagine this dirty girl walking on my white carpet. Do I want to find out about her background and find out what organization might help? I do not have the time. My day is supercharged at the office, and my secretary is very busy. What a dilemma. It was solved yesterday. I saw an ambulance and police car parked where she usually sits crunched up. I saw two men carrying a stretcher, and I ran on. I jogged past the building on my way home. There were no cars, no one, just emptiness. Part of me rejoiced. I don't have to do anything now. And another voice in my head said sternly, "You missed an opportunity. You will never learn to care. You are a tinsel do-gooder." You have to listen carefully to this next one. It's a play on words, but it's fun. To be or not to be? That is the question. Everybody knows how to glibly recite those words. I mean, everyone who had to read Shakespeare in class or did it on his own volition. But think for a minute. What does it really, really mean? Take the phrase out of the context of the play, and what do you have? Two infinitive verbs, and one of them is negative. Frankly, there are no personal pronouns involved, so saying these words in a serious, low-modulated tenor voice while shaking your head judiciously means what, I ask? Then comes the harumphing and trying to give an explanation. After all, no one has ever been asked to put it into words. Who is involved? Is it I am, you are, he is, and so forth? I also know how to conjugate Are we talking about the verb followed by an adjective like, I am hot, he is hungry, you are cold? Or it can be followed by a noun. We are nuns, I'm a carpenter. And it can also be, I use the verb again, part of a philosophical discussion as, I am part of the human race, ergo, I am that I am. Or the realist will then use the same argument negatively. I come from a single cell, a descendant of the monkey, so I am not part of the human race, but the animal kingdom. Then there is the religious theory. I am divine, which is counteracted by I am not. There is only one Son of God, and I am not He. Then there is the second part. That is the question. Again, what question? A statement followed immediately by a negative one precludes a question because it's a statement. A question means that something needs to be answered by someone, but since there is no particularity in just throwing a verb around, and this one is a cornerstone of our language, it means nothing. Think about to bathe or not to bathe. That is the question. Or to write or not to write. That is the question. Let's get real. We are the ones deciding the answer. There's nothing esoteric about that. Why even have it posed as a question? One should be careful taking groups of words, making them sound interesting, and then trying to really make sense and finding that meanings evaporate. A lot of phrases have become part of our folklore, and we use them believing that everyone is on the same wavelength. But be careful. It's not always so. To go back to the line, to be or not to be. If you go deeply enough, it means, do you want to be in this world or not? It presumes suicide, not a pretty subject. And then, psychologically, the question denotes a definite decision on the part of the person who said it. Is he depressed? Should we worry? You can now see that there are many manifold perceptions to what one thought was a well-known saying. By the way, if you drive a car, the next rhyming story may be meaningful. Potholes. We are so spoiled in this country. Why, do you ask me? Because we want our cars to run smoothly, otherwise we get very unhappy. Now, brethren, think about another century. Just think for a minute how it would be. There would be horses, carriages, streets would be smelly with all the defecation. Where would you be? Impossible to go from the country to the city, or vice versa, from the city to the country. You cannot imagine the roads. They would be so busy. You would consider yourself very lucky if you arrive with your clothes not muddy and your temper in check, because you'd be so angry. So sisters, just for a moment, listen to me. Feel peaceful in your souls when you get ready to drive in Ithaca during this time. Have mercy on other drivers. Don't curse like so many who do when they hit a pothole and yell rudely. Think of other conveniences of our 21st century. Be grateful you can drive and go repeatedly from one place to another without impunity. So join hands and repeat after me. Potholes, oh potholes, I know you will be filled fully, and order will be restored very quickly. Hallelujah. The wreath. Both the grandmother and the youngest grandchild sat side by side on the porch. In front of them was a mountain of twigs and flowers from the woods and 2 satin ribbons. Grandma had her hands folded on her lap. Her rheumy eyes were half closed. Her head bent a little sideways. She was thinking that another cold season was approaching. My poor bones are feeling it worse this year, but this is Donna's first time helping to make the wreath. I must summon energy and I must try. And with a small laugh, she handed Donna a flower, a bramble, and some twine. So began the family ritual. Donna felt so grown up. Here she was, 6 years old, and this time when anyone came to the door, they would know she had been the helper this year. So both worked, chatted, sang, and had a marvelous time. Twilight came upon them suddenly, but the wreath was finished. It was breathtakingly beautiful. The pink satin bows made it look so gay. Donna was thrilled. Grandma said, "Tomorrow we'll ask your father to hang it on the front door. This is the best wreath yet. I'm so very proud of you." Donna beamed, and this was a moment she would remember all her life. Next day, Donna woke up eagerly and rushed down to breakfast. No one was there. There was a hush in the house. What happened? Donna felt scared. Just then, her father came down and took Donna on his knees and said, "Sweetheart, you and Grandma had a wonderful day yesterday. Always remember that. During the night, she left us and is with the angels." In the autumn light, the wreath on the door had a huge black bow which is lifted by the wind. Masks. We all wear masks, not just on Halloween. We have layers upon layers, all are unseen. They are part of our makeup, and we are aware which one we want to use and with whom and where. We show a pleasant face to the one we care, to another frown, a loud voice, and beware, at work the industrious mode always takes over. "Yes, sir." "Of course, ma'am." "We'll fetch," like the dog Rover. Where are we really in this complex package of visages? Do we know? We give off so many images. At the end of this earthly life, will there be time when we all become simple and everything will be fine? One day in the life of a male person. I'm not a male man. Am I a male woman? I dislike the term because it reminds me of those women in other countries who come to the U.S. as male brides, their husbands-to-be never having met them before. Does that make me a male person? Well, that doesn't make sense either. I'm a woman who for a living distributes the mail in our small town. Okay, how about calling me a distributor? Sounds like a beer commercial, right? I digress. Well, let me tell you about one particular day. First, I'm a good listener, so very often I'm asked to come in for a cup of tea. Like I said, this is a small town. I'm never in a hurry because there are not too many letters or packages to be delivered. So I can be called the deliverer. Sounds a bit too Catholic, I think. Well, to go on. I hardly started on my rounds when Mrs. Turbin, who was watching for me, rushed out the door and pulled me into her living room. She put her fingers to her lips. She didn't want her old father to listen. He was dozing in the next room. The gist was that Mr. Dukas, who lived 2 houses down, had been murdered, and his wife had been taken into custody. I have to tell you that I'm a great mystery reader. so that I know how to ask pointed questions. What day was it? A Thursday, she tells me. At what time did the police say that happened? Between 2 and 3 in the afternoon. I thanked my hostess for the information and I proceeded on my way. Meanwhile, something was nagging at the back of my head. For once, Thursday was a busy day, but I started to go over it and then it hit me. Mrs. Dukas was with Mrs. Orley having tea when I went by. They had asked me in, but I had to refuse. That was around 2:30. And then when I went back to the post office at 4, I saw her coming down the steps and she said, "I must hurry home and start dinner for Leon. We forgot to look at the time because we were so engrossed in this new TV soap opera." I just finished calling the chief of police, and after I told him my story, he said, "I will be called in to testify at the court on Monday, and then they will free Mrs. Dukas." All in a day's work, I say. Sometimes there can be a little excitement. I'm sure next week I'll be asking everyone's home. I'll be a bit of a heroine. Not bad for a woman giving out mail. High noon. We live in a small town and we still have a party line so that we are pretty well connected with each other's lives. Let's tell the truth. We all of us eavesdrop, even the minister's wife. I've just read a sociological article which stated categorically that women need other women with whom to share their thoughts and feelings. An example was cited about a couple who moved to another state where the young wife knew no one, and the husband could not understand why his wife was talking so much on the telephone. It was her lifeline. Otherwise, she would have become severely depressed. Men in general do not seem to need that type of verbal intimacy. Anyway, this is just the background of what happened last month. We call it High Noon at Medina. It started innocuously enough on Friday morning when Frida was planning to call up Julie and overheard this cryptic conversation. I saw Jim again. He parked on the next block, hoping not to be conspicuous. He must think that he's the invisible man. Just because we're indoors doesn't mean we don't know what's going on in the neighborhood. Julie, listen to me. It's the third time he's going over there, and I timed him. He stays exactly 1 hour. Then he runs to his car and drives off like a bat out of hell. Melba, what do you think we should do? I can't tell my Bob about Jim. He's going to tell me to mind my own business. Well, let me think it over. But I have a good mind to tell Frida. Oh, God, no. She's in delicate health. Don't even think of it. Let's just see what happens. Frida waited for the two women to finish their conversation before slowly hanging up the phone. They were talking about Jim, her husband. She knew that he was not happy. The project he had been working on was phased out, and they had offered him another position in this godforsaken town. She was of no help. Her allergies to dust were aggravated because of the acacia trees in the backyard, and she had no one to talk to. Well, that wasn't quite true. At church, he had met Josie. She was on the welcoming committee and was ever so friendly. She took an interest in Frida, and their acquaintance slowly developed. They even had lunch together occasionally. But she didn't know her well enough to confide in her. I must think. What do I really want to do? Jim having an affair? Oh, I'm too tired to think about it. I'm going to take a nap. That evening, Jim was in a fine mood. He mentioned that he was being promoted and would have to travel now and then. As a matter of fact, he would be gone the next weekend. Ah, thought Frida, a likely story. I want to know who that homewrecker is. I'll give her a piece of my mind. And so began the vigil. Somehow, by the word of mouth, all the stay-at-home women were caught up in the exciting game of vigilance. Behind closed blinds, the town was watching. Frida thought she was alone, but became aware of others. How? Through the phone, of course. But although everyone mentioned Jim by name, the unknown woman remained a mystery. A week went by, then another. The weekend of Jim's trip was coming up, and Frida thought it was time for less passivity and more action. She decided to follow Jim. As I said, it's a small town. And although Jim had a car and she was on foot, it became clear what street he was heading towards. "Oh no, it's not possible," she cried silently. "No, no, 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 not Josie." But it was. She ran home. Everyone behind their blinds felt pity, but no one called Frida. The latter spent the afternoon conjuring ways to deal with her faithless husband, from breaking his neck, poisoning his food. But when she came to the part of boiling him in oil like one of the tribes in Africa, she laughed out loud. And she said to herself, "I live in the century of emancipated women. Get a divorce, get a life." And with these thoughts, she cheerfully packed her husband's suitcase, waved him goodbye, and looked in the yellow pages for a lawyer, made an appointment for the following Monday, and cleaned her house with a light heart. Sunday afternoon, she received a phone call. "This is Captain Donovan from the police department. We've had an unusual heavy rain, and your husband's car was plowed under by the oncoming truck. He died instantly." Frida numbly walked over to the little church and stayed there for an hour. The next day, the town was a-buzzing. Frida had called Josie and told her to meet her in the town square at 10 o'clock. Josie said she'd make it. Everyone was at their posts wondering what would happen. Frida, her apron on, she'd forgotten to take it off. Josie had her house dress. She'd been doing her house cleaning. Frida went to Josie with her arms extended and said, "Josie, I have sad news for you. We have lost our man." And then she enveloped the young woman who had burst out into loud sobs. No, our high noon was not about fighting, but was about loving. Thank you for joining me. I hope to be with you again in the future.